She left her house on a Monday morning to buy a dress. She was seen by a cashier. She was seen by a friend. Then Fifth Avenue swallowed her whole, and no one, not her family, not the Pinkertons, not the New York Police Department, ever found her again. This is the case of Dorothy Arnold. It begins in Manhattan, New York, in the winter of 1910. Manhattan at that time was a city of extraordinary and deliberate contrast. More than 1 million poor immigrants crammed into tenements on the lower reaches of the island, while half of the millionaires in the entire country lined Fifth Avenue with their opulent mansions. The city had, in the span of a single generation, transformed itself into something that earlier inhabitants would not have recognized. In 40 short years, New York had become a city of skyscrapers, subways, streetlights, and Central Park, as well as sprawling bridges that connected the once distant boroughs. The Upper East Side, where this account begins, occupied a particular position within that transformed city. In 1901, Andrew Carnegie had built his imposing mansion on East 91st Street and Fifth Avenue, and the blocks between East 79th and East 96th had filled with townhouses and mansions belonging to families whose names defined the social register of the period. The neighborhood carried with it a set of expectations as precisely maintained as the brownstone facades that lined its streets. The women who lived there were expected to marry well, to receive callers, to attend the appropriate functions, and to conduct themselves within the narrow boundaries that such an address imposed. The men who maintained those addresses were understood to be the final authority on every matter that occurred beneath their roofs. The Gilded Age in New York was a period of growth, wealth, lavish parties, and rapid social change. But for the daughters of its most prominent families, that change had not yet extended to the fundamental question of how a woman of good standing might arrange her own life. That question, unanswered by the conventions of the period, sits at the center of everything that follows. The family that occupied the residence at 108 East 79th Street was known in the neighborhood as the Arnolds. Dorothy was born July 1, 1885, in New York City, the second of 4 children of Francis Rose Arnold and his wife, Mary Martha Parks Arnold. She had an older brother, John, born in 1884, and 2 younger siblings, Dan, born in 1888, and a sister, Marjorie, born in 1892. Her father was a Harvard graduate and senior partner of F.R. Arnold and Company, an importer of fine goods. Her uncle served as a justice of the United States Supreme Court. The Arnolds were, by the standards of their neighborhood and their period, a family of established and recognized standing. The eldest daughter of the high society Arnolds, a rich and well-connected family with roots tracing back to the Mayflower, Dorothy was fluent in several languages and had graduated from Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania in 1905, where she had studied literature. She had returned to the family home on East 79th Street following her graduation and had resumed the position expected of a young woman of her circumstances, the unmarried daughter of a prominent household, present at the appropriate social occasions, receiving the attention of suitable admirers, and waiting. What Dorothy Arnold was waiting for was not, however, what her family had in mind. Dorothy had dreams of becoming a writer. From her mansion on the Upper East Side, she wrote several short stories, including works she titled Poinsettia Flames and Lotus Leaves, and sent them off for publication. She had submitted stories to McClure's magazine, a publication of national standing, and had received rejections in return. She had asked her father for a studio apartment in the bohemian Greenwich Village neighborhood in order to write. Her father had forbidden it, telling her that a good writer could write anywhere. The remark was recorded by those who knew the family and entered the record of the case in the months that followed her disappearance. It stands there still. In the months prior to vanishing, Dorothy had rented a post office box, keeping its existence a secret from her loved ones. It is believed she used the box to receive rejected manuscripts so that her family would not discover the extent of her failure as a writer. The box was a small and private resistance. It was the act of a woman managing the distance between who she was permitted to be and who she intended to become. If you find value in cases preserved this way, in the facts as they exist in the record, without elaboration and without omission, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below telling us where you are watching from. Now, back to the record. Among the secrets Dorothy kept from her family was a relationship with a man named George S. Griscom Jr., a 40-year-old unemployed bachelor from Pittsburgh, whom she had been seeing since her days at Bryn Mawr. Griscom had an embarrassing broken engagement to another rich heiress, who had called off the wedding the night before. Dorothy's parents strongly disapproved of him and had forbidden her to continue the relationship. Dorothy continued to correspond with him regardless. In September 1910, 3 months before she disappeared, Dorothy lied to her parents and told them she was going to visit a former Bryn Mawr classmate in Boston. Instead, she spent a week in a hotel with Griscom. Arnold's parents discovered the rendezvous after she pawned $500 worth of jewelry to finance their week-long stay. When she returned, the prohibition on seeing Griscom was made absolute. Dorothy continued to write to him regardless. In a letter written to Griscom in late November 1910, Dorothy disclosed her distress following a further rejection from McClure's magazine. She wrote, "Failure stares me in the face. All I can see is a long road, with no turning. Mother will always think an accident has happened." The letter was in Griscom's possession when investigators found him months later. Its final sentence would become one of the most examined phrases in the long record of this case. Whether it was a premonition, a statement of despair, or simply an observation about her mother's anxious temperament, the record does not resolve. Those who have studied the case have not agreed on its meaning in the century since it was written. Dorothy was certainly a spirited, independent woman who felt stifled by her father's control of her. She was living something of a double life, keeping her relationship with Griscom under wraps, and lying in order to continue seeing him. The circumstances of her life, in the weeks before December 12, 1910, combined a failed literary ambition, a forbidden relationship conducted in secrecy, a controlling household from which she had been denied the means of independent departure, and a second rejection from the publication she had most wanted to impress. These were the conditions in which Dorothy Arnold left her home on the morning of the day she was last seen. On the morning of Monday, the 12th of December 1910, Dorothy Arnold told her mother that she intended to go shopping for a dress to wear at her younger sister Marjorie's upcoming debutante party. Her mother offered to accompany her. Dorothy said she preferred to go alone. She left the house at East 79th Street at approximately 11 in the morning. She was dressed, as witnesses would later confirm, in a tailor-made blue serge suit, a long blue coat, lapis lazuli earrings, and a small black velvet hat. She carried $30 in cash, nearly $1,000 by present values, and left her clothes, jewels, and passport at home. Her destination was Brentano's bookstore at 5th Avenue and 27th Street. She was observed there, leafing through books at the new fiction counter. She purchased a collection of short stories by a writer named Emily Calvin Blake, charging the purchase to the Arnold family account. Before reaching the bookstore, she had stopped at the Park and Tilford store and charged a half-pound of chocolates to her father's account. These purchases, a box of chocolates and a book of someone else's stories, were the last documented transactions of her life. Outside Brentano's, at the corner of 5th Avenue and 27th Street, Dorothy encountered a friend. She told the friend she was planning to walk home through Central Park. Everyone who saw her that afternoon remarked that she seemed happy and cheerful. The friend observed nothing unusual in her manner and nothing that suggested distress or apprehension. The conversation ended. Dorothy Arnold walked north on 5th Avenue towards Central Park. She was not seen alive again. When Dorothy failed to appear for dinner that evening, her family grew concerned. The family didn't immediately contact the police. Instead, they called friends. The next day, they hired the Pinkerton detective agency, but still refused to alert the authorities. Their fear of a social scandal outweighed their urgency. The family's first action was to contact John S. Keith, a friend and attorney who had long regarded Dorothy as something like a daughter. Keith immediately went to the Arnold home and searched Dorothy's room. He found nothing missing but the clothes she had been wearing. Keith also found personal letters on her desk, 2 folders for transatlantic ocean liners, and burned papers in the fireplace. The family believed the burned papers were the rejected manuscripts. Keith visited hospitals, morgues, and jails across New York City. He found nothing. The Pinkerton agency was engaged and conducted its own systematic search. Detectives visited places Dorothy was known to frequent and questioned former classmates and friends. They pursued every available lead across New York and then abroad. Dorothy was not found. The investigation that followed disclosed, in stages, the full extent of what Dorothy had kept from her family. The secret post office box, the correspondence with Griscom, the week in Boston, the pawned jewelry, the letter in which she had written that failure stared her in the face. Each disclosure was managed by the family's attorneys with the concern for reputation that had characterized every step of the response to her disappearance. In December 1910, the Arnold family sent Griscom a telegram asking for information about Dorothy's disappearance. He was found vacationing with his parents in Florence, Italy. In a return telegram, Griscom denied any knowledge of her whereabouts and claimed to know nothing of her disappearance. Dorothy's mother and brother subsequently sailed to Europe to question him in person. Griscom denied any involvement, vowing both his love for Dorothy and his intentions to marry her upon her return. The confrontation produced nothing of evidential value. The Arnolds reluctantly held a press conference on January 25, 1911, 6 weeks after Dorothy's disappearance, offering a reward of $1,000 for any information leading to her recovery. The story immediately made front-page headlines, with Dorothy's photograph running alongside coverage in newspapers across the country. Her disappearance ignited a media storm that scandalized one of Manhattan's most prestigious families and sparked over a century of speculation. Almost immediately, America had a new obsession. Her image was printed in newspapers across the world, and soon everyone was on the lookout for the young woman. The reward was never collected. Not one viable lead emerged from the thousands of tips submitted in the weeks that followed the press conference. Dorothy's father told reporters that he was firmly convinced his daughter had been attacked in Central Park and her body thrown into the reservoir. He stated he had 2 clues but would keep the information private. The police dismissed his theory. The reservoir was frozen in the days preceding Dorothy's disappearance, and when the water thawed in spring, a search produced nothing. The New York Police Department announced in early 1911 that they had decided to stop investigating Arnold's disappearance, stating they believed she was dead. Deputy Police Commissioner William J. Flynn stated, "The girl has now been missing for 75 days, and in all that time, not a single clue has been found that was worth the name." The leads that arrived in the years that followed were examined and each found wanting. In early February 1911, Arnold's father received a postcard signed Dorothy, bearing a New York City postmark that read, "I am safe." While the writing matched his daughter's, Francis said he believed that someone had copied her handwriting from samples featured in the newspaper and that the postcard was nothing more than a cruel joke. 2 ransom letters were received, demanding $5,000 for Dorothy's safe return. They were proven to be false. In April 1914, an illegal abortion clinic, operating from a basement in Bellevue, Pennsylvania, was raided by police. The clinic was run by a physician named C. Meredith was known as the House of Mystery because several young women had vanished after visiting. A physician named Dr. H. E. Lutz testified to the New York District Attorney that Meredith told him Dorothy had suffered complications and died at the clinic. Some supposed Dorothy had fallen pregnant during her secret week in Boston and had traveled to Pittsburgh on the advice of Griscom for a procedure that ultimately killed her. Dorothy's father called the theory ridiculous. No body was produced. No evidence was recovered. In April 1916, 5 years after Arnold's disappearance, a convicted felon named Edward Glenorris, then imprisoned in Rhode Island for attempted extortion, claimed that he had been paid $250 to bury the body of a young woman in December 1910. Glenorris claimed that an acquaintance known only as Little Louis had hired him to drive a woman from New Rochelle. In New Rochelle, he said, they were met by two men, one of whom was described as wealthy and well-dressed, matching Griscom's physical description. Glenorris said the unconscious woman was identified to him as Dorothy Arnold, and that a signet ring she was known to be wearing at the time of her disappearance was on her finger. When investigators searched the location where Glenorris claimed her body had been kept, they found nothing. In 1921, a full decade after her disappearance, Nipt Captain John H. Ayres, head of the Bureau of Missing Persons, made a shocking announcement. The case had been solved, and Dorothy Arnold was no longer considered a missing person. When pressed for details, however, Ayres refused to elaborate. The Arnold family was blindsided and furious. Ayres was forced to walk back his statement and later claimed he had only meant that the family might have resolved the matter privately. The damage was done. The public was now convinced that something had been covered up, and the silence from both the police and the Arnolds only deepened the mystery. Dorothy's father died in 1922. Her mother died in 1928. Both of them passed away believing their daughter was already deceased. The reward was never collected. The file was never formally closed. By April 1921, Arnold's parents had spent over $100,000 attempting to find her. The sum, by present values, represents a figure in excess of $1.5 million. It produced nothing. The case of Dorothy Arnold has remained in the American record for more than a century. Her case is the oldest missing person file listed with the Charlie Project, a public database of more than 15,000 missing people. Her name is etched into New York City history, not for who she was, but for the space she left behind. What that space contains is the question the record has never answered. A woman of independent ambition, constrained by the conventions of her class and period. A secret life, conducted in the margins of a respectable address. A final afternoon on one of the busiest streets in the world, in clear weather, surrounded by people who knew her, from which she departed and did not return. She disappeared from one of the busiest streets on earth, at the sunniest hour of a brilliant afternoon, with thousands within sight and reach, men and women who knew her on every side, and officers of the law thickly strewn in her path. No one saw what happened next. No one has accounted for it in the 115 years since. The case of Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold was the single matter examined in this account. The investigation was opened, the reward was offered, the leads were followed, and each exhausted. She was never found. The case became part of the national record. It has not left.